you're lying in bed at night. Do you ever randomly remember some relatively minor social missteps or poorly chosen words you did said years earlier, and then beat yourself up over it even though it really wasn't a big deal? If so, what happened? Story 1. I accidentally mixed up an inside joke with the wrong friend group with disastrous results. Friend group 1. The joke was when someone calls and asks who's all there, we would add Daryl to the list of names. Daryl wasn't a real person. The joke wasn't really funny and made no sense out of context, but I guess that's why it was an inside joke. Friend group 2. I was hanging out, playing some drinking games with a bunch of people that I hadn't hung out with in a while. It was a kind of get-together to remember a friend that they had who had recently died in a car accident. I didn't know him that well, but I was always down to party. Anyway, the phone rings, and the person who answered started listing off names, sorting my cards for another round of presidents, and I offhandedly said "heh" and Daryl. It was the typical record scratch moment where everyone stopped and looked at me. Daryl was the name of the friend who had just died. This happened in 2002, and I still think about it all the time. When I was in 5th grade, our teacher said a joke in front of the class, and everyone laughed, including myself. After the laughter died down, a girl looked up at me and said, "You have a really disgusting laugh, EW." I became so self-conscious about laughter since that specific day, and after years I have trouble actually laughing. My brain kind of made a habit to just smile or slightly chuckle at something, even if it is really funny. Edit the girl's last name, when translated from my native language to English, is cock. Have a nice day. Story 2. Junior prom. I blurted out during dinner to my date. I'm so bored, and I have no idea why it came out of my mouth. In pretty well manner and quiet. I forget how I tried to play it off, but I felt so bad. Story 3. I went through a phase where I scolded people for reading Harry Potter because my parents told me it was evil. Lots of awkward situations because of that. Story 4. For most of my education, I went to public school, and like most kids, I was socially awkward for high school. I received an academic scholarship to a private Catholic school. It was a really big deal for my family. I didn't know anyone at the new school. Between an odd combination of academics, sports, and the tail end of puberty, I became very popular in this new school. I wasn't used to the attention, and it definitely got to my teenage head. Nearly all of my social circles became around the new school, and not with my old local friends. In my junior year, I head to a McDonald's for lunch with a few friends from the new school. Working the counter, I see a girl who I used to go to public school with that I used to have a crush on. She just lit up when she saw me. She was so excited, and I was a shitty teenager, and I just ignored her. I pretended I didn't recognize her. She looked so deflated when I didn't acknowledge her. Note this was the 90s. My family moved a few times after that. I settled down in a different part of the country after university. I never made it back to that town. I've relived that moment for years now. Fast forward to one of those nights when I relive that moment, and I decide to look her up on Facebook to apologize. I find out she died 10 years ago in an auto accident. Since I found out her fate, I feel even more awful about that moment. Story 5. When I was 11, it was my first day at a new school, and all the other students were also new. The math teacher started our first class by asking each of us about our education background, what school we came from, what they taught in our last year's math class, etc. Just trying to get a general idea of what kind of students he was dealing with. Thing is, I was so nervous that I spaced out for a bit and got lost in my overthinking mind, so I didn't hear the teacher's questions to my classmates. When it got to my turn, the teacher just said, "Now tell me about you." Assuming I understood what kind of information he was expecting, I just went straight into a monologue that started with, "So, I was born in the south zone of the city, but my mom decided to move to our current neighborhood a few months after divorcing my dad," and went on and on giving some very specific details about my short life. Everyone had a really confused look on their faces, and as soon as I realized the teacher was also completely lost, I stopped talking and went instantly red. The teacher then said, "That's all really great, but I was only interested in what happened last year, not the last 10. And everyone started laughing. Next day, nobody remembered it anymore, but 12 years later, it still comes to mind in pretty random moments. Edit a typo. Story 6. Freshman year of high school. It was one of those days before school starts, and you meet your teacher and your parents are there. My teacher was handing me a piece of paper, and I didn't see the paper, so I shook his hand. He said, "Oh," and my mom said, and I panicked and said I just wanted to be polite, so I still want to die when I think of that. Story 7. Bruh. I can't even begin to pinpoint one event. I guess one thing is when I was 11, I asked my teacher if I could go to the bathroom 3 times during class and told me no. And well, sure enough, I couldn't hold it any longer, and there's bullying for the next 6 months. Literally shakes me in bed about how I've never felt that low before. Somehow I managed to live through it, though, we all got flaws. Mine is a bladder that urinates prematurely. Story 8. I was visiting Portland for a wedding that lined up with my birthday. As well, we went out to celebrate and finished the night at a karaoke bar. Realizing I'm too drunk to sing, I Pick My Name is by Eminem as my song to perform. There's two versions of that song. One is the original release, the other tamed down, which you most commonly hear today. The woman controlling the music put on the original, and off I went. One of the lines at the end is running over lesbians in a spaceship while they screaming at me, "Let's just be friends." I finished the song and am met by applause from my friends and one other table. The rest of the place is silent. The DJ goes, "Nice job." Don't know if it was the best choice for Gay Women's Night, though. And at that moment, I wanted to leave my skin. Story 9, I was in the 4th grade, and it was Valentine's Day. I was the new kid in school, and this one boy had been picking on me all year. My 10-year-old self was very non-confrontational. So I wrote a paragraph on the back of his nerd Valentine, explaining that I don't like it when he's mean to me, and I don't understand why he has to be. He couldn't read my handwriting and brought it to the teacher, who made me read it aloud to both of them. I think about that day every day of my life. He even ended up finding me online and contacting me to apologize a few years ago, but all I can think of is the cringe. Story 10, when I was in the 4th grade, I lived in the middle of nowhere, and there was practically no minorities, just white country people. This Mexican family had just moved in and could barely speak any English, and I befriended one of the kids my age in school. He came over to my place, and we were both joking around about his bad English. Just doing what kids do, I would pretend to speak with his accent, and then he would copy, and it was silly, stupid, and innocent. My mom told me I was being really inconsiderate, and how uncool it was to make fun of someone for not being able to speak English. I felt terrible. The next day at school, my friend came up to me and started joking with me again, but I just shook my head and looked down at my desk in embarrassment. He had no idea what was wrong, and I was too young and dumb to be able to explain my behavior to him. As I grew older, I spent probably 20 years thinking about that day, and how much of I was to be friendly one day, and then without explaining anything, just stop talking to him out of embarrassment. I felt really bad about it for a long time, and often laid awake at night thinking about it. I ended up finding him on Facebook about a year ago, and we friend each other, so I told him how bad I felt about it and apologized. He just laughed it off and said it was no big deal, and he was still really thankful to find someone as friendly as me when he didn't know anyone here. He said he figured my mom had said something to me about it, and it never bothered him. I don't know if maybe he was just being nice to me or not, but it was such a relief to hear it. It really felt like a weight had been lifted off of me. Story 11, this happened back when I was 6th or 7th grade. Me and a couple of friends were browsing the neighborhood our school was in after the school day was over. We happened on a bus stop with a couple of girls seemingly our age. We stopped and tried to chat them up, but their bus came soon after, and they had to go. We see their bus stop at a traffic light, not 20 meters away, and one of us says, "Let's run to the next stop." Nobody thought to ask then what. And off we were, sprinting madly behind the bus. Surprisingly enough, we somehow made it to the next stop just as the bus was arriving. Then the doors opened, the girls sat there giggling, and we did nothing. Literally, I even remember like the bus driver held the doors a bit longer, but I might be imagining it as the memory is so old. We just sat there, tried to catch our breaths as my lungs burned. And then the doors closed, and the bus went off to the next stop. And none of us said anything. We just walked it off, went on to the next stupid we would do. I don't know about any of the other guys, but this still haunts me as one of the cringiest moments of my life so far. Story 12 was talking with a black friend of mine, and we were discussing random haircuts and styles we would get if we were other races. I said I wanted that common look. He thought I said that common look. I meant the rapper, shaved head with a nice trimmed-up goatee. It didn't dawn on me until a week later why he gave me that weird look after I said it. He thought I was saying that common look every black guy has. Still makes me twitch every once in a while. Story 13 in 7th grade 06 for me. I had just started watching more anime on Toonami and was really into it. One day, we had to do a paper describing ourselves coming back from summer break, and the class had to put a person to a description. I named my favorite jacket that I wore every day Takashi, for knows why, and the cutest new girl in the class read my description out loud. And in it I described the love for my jacket and how I had named it was it is. The cute girl looks weirded out, stares at the class, and goes, "What weirdo names their jacket?" Once no one guessed who, as I piped up and said, "Well, maybe they aren't here today." Trying to cover myself. I forgot, though, that this was an IN class assignment. And the teacher said, no, it had to have been written by someone here. Finally, one of my friends goes, "Hey, XXXX, aren't you like the only one in class who plays soccer?" Also written in my description. I sunk in my seat as we moved on to the next description. I wake up sweating, feeling that jacket still on my shoulders. Edit really did not expect the attention and upvotes on one of my most remembered cringy moments. Please stop upvoting before the cute girl in class recognizes me. Story 14, 4th grade classroom. We were having a face-off between students on who could name the capital of whichever state our teacher named. I had been on a roll getting a few correct in a row. Then the teacher says Kentucky with all of the enthusiasm and seriousness in the world. I screamed frank. Everyone was dying laughing except for me. At the time, looking back, it cracks me up that I was so upset about it. I was in 5th grade or so and was sitting in class with a couple classmates. We were talking about Weird Al songs we liked. This one girl asked, "Have you heard some Weird Al song?" And I followed with, "Have you ever heard I'm So Sick of You?" which I guess they hadn't heard because she looked immediately down at the desk, sort of somber, and the dude did a little ho-ho as if I did a nice burn. I guess they thought I was telling this girl I was so sick of her. I had no clue at the time, though, so I just let it ride. Still feel bad about that one. Story 15. When I was 6, my teacher asked us what's our parents' occupation. I said my mom does the dishes, and after 5 minutes of explaining what she does at home, my teacher just took it as my mom is a housewife. My mom is a chemistry teacher, and I told her that I said that when I was 12. You really can't blame me. I didn't really think about where my mom went during her work hours. I just knew she went somewhere, and just kept playing with my toy cars, which I stole from my brother. Story 16. When I walked down the aisle at my wedding, I was so nervous and focused on not tripping that I did not acknowledge my dad. I didn't realize this until I saw the video my aunt had made for me. You can see my dad lean in to give me a kiss on the cheek, but I just keep walking. He kind of shrugs and then goes to sit down. It's been 18 years, and this still flashes through my head when I'm trying to fall asleep. Also, that time I was trying to get to the school bus and the sidewalk was icy, so I slipped and fell really hard on my butt. The kids on the bus laughed at me, so I chose to sit there with my head down, wishing I could disappear while the bus drove away, and I walked a mile home, yes, in the snow, uphill both ways. Story 17. In 8th grade, I farted once, and a few minutes later, someone smelled it and asked who did it. They asked if it was me, and I just started crying. I used to be very sensitive, and so I thought they were accusing me and felt really bad, so I cried. It's partially because of that I am now much less emotional and tend to keep my emotions bottled up. Edit clarified that I bottle up my emotions. Story 18. I went to Dairy Queen with my daughter. She brought along her kitten. The cute girl at the walk-up window asked my daughter what the kitten's name was. Princess was the response, smiling and feebly attempting to make conversation. I said today to indicate that my daughter changed the cat's name frequently. I got a dirty look, and the girl left the window to go make whatever cold treat we had ordered. It wasn't until later on the walk home that I realized that she thought I was telling her to hurry up and make my order. Still haunts me years later for some reason. Story 19. I was visiting my cousin about 4 months ago, and we didn't have the same greeting handshake, so it was like that really weird thing with your hands where you end up in some super awkward handshake. Last night, I thought about this like 20 minutes and blamed myself. SMH, that was super unnecessary. Story 20. I made a presentation in my public speaking class in college about how antidepressants were bad and you should seek other methods of treating depression. This was dumb for a few reasons. One, I just had a bad experience with antidepressants in high school, but apparently could only see my own perspective. Two, it was just a class to teach public speaking methods, and I did not need to pick such a heavy topic. Three, somehow, I was so self-absorbed I could not register the weird looks I was getting from people. And when a classmate said, well, that was balls in me after class, I did not understand, for I was a psychology major and I should know better, and I do now. Anyway, that one stabs at me. I also made a presentation in my sociology class while semi-high, which was supposed to be about myself and my relationship to society, and I included a bunch of weird modeling pictures and stuff about my eclectic music taste. Oh, I'm so special, I like Missy Elliott and Tom Waits. Is that what this is about? Anyway, I'm going to bury my own head now. Story 21. I was around 15 and having a complete breakdown of all aspects of life. My mother had died suddenly. I had untreated mental illness and was self-harming a lot for years, and no one was listening. My dad was understandably a wreck, and school fell to the wayside. I was barely going and intending on dropping out. I couldn't do anything, let alone at all. There was a high school dance. I was desperate to have some fun and pretty much have this be the highlight before I left. Though I failed at communicating this, I really wanted a friend to dance with me and her other friends. She was awkwardly sitting alone. I pushed her too hard and made her cry. I couldn't see through my own to see how bad of a position I put her in. All I could see was my world collapsing. We never spoke again. She went from my best friend to nothing in one night. That was 15 years ago, and I still feel awful. Hindsight is always 20/20, as they say. Story 22. I have ADHD, and this is basically my life. If I had $1 for every time I ran my mouth before my brain thought better of it, I wouldn't need to work anymore, and nighttime brain loves to dwell on each and every one. Story 23. A couple of years ago, I was at the drive-up window of my bank. When the transaction was finished, I started to raise my hand to wave goodbye to the teller. But instead of waving, I started to flip him off. It happened completely subconsciously. I don't think I was able to stop it in time because he had a shocked look on his face. I eventually apologized, but I still feel horrible shame over it. Every time I see him, the shame comes back. Plus now, I have a crush on him. Story 24, when I was 12, me and my mate found our favorite English teacher's Facebook account and found out that he was a pretty big alcoholic. My mate told everyone about this, and we both got detention the whole week. Because of it, the worst thing wasn't the detention, it was the fact that the teacher no longer liked us and he put less effort in his class, making us mostly do book work. Story 25, my wee guy came over to my apartment and tried to give me a handshake that involved a fist pound and other not-so-complicated gestures. I totally fumbled it, and he said, "Oh man, just hold up and let's try that again." So we tried again, and I fumbled again. He just sighed, sold me some weed, and left. I've never felt so white. I ended up getting a new weed guy because I was so embarrassed. Story 26, last year, I saw a 4-year-old kid with his father, and the kid wants to go to X place, but the father wants to go home. So the kid was crying and slowly running to X place, and the father was calling him to return now. And Dummy said to the father, "If you want to go get him for you." And there was a woman laughing at that. And the father with a WTF face said, "No, thanks." Story 27, in primary school. This girl really looked like my friend from the back. I went up to her, tapped her on the shoulder, and said hi, then played it off like I didn't just mistake her for someone else and left. That was probably 23 years ago now. Story 28, went swimming with a group of friends as a kid to the local pool. Probably 11, girl in a friend group, jumped on my back while I was underwater. She was just being playful. It freaked me out because it was coming up and already sure to breathe, but I played it off trying to be cool. An hour later, I was describing what happened to my other friend and explained, and then I felt this big fat weight on me, and I couldn't breathe. I didn't realize the girl was behind me. She burst into tears, and she ran home crying. I've never felt so small. I remember that moment and still feel terrible 20 years later. I learned in that moment that it's important to choose my words because I wanted to describe how I felt being underwater and scared, but I didn't have a developed way to articulate it because I used those words. She became the object of the story. It became about her fatness, then about my scaredness. I didn't mean to call her fat, but I did. And to any bystander or observer, they would justly see me as a bully. Story 29, I stole my sister's boyfriend when I was 16. I'm not proud of it, and she's still mad at me. Edit, he was 8 years older than me. Should have added that. Story 30, when I was 17, I worked at a CVS. One of my coworkers was a guy my age who went to different school. He was really cute, but he had a girlfriend who was away at college, and besides, I was in no position to date. Meanwhile, the love of my life had broken up with me, but I didn't want him to know how much he had hurt me. So, I was determined to have a date to the homecoming dance. I thought of my coworker who was good looking, and because he went to another school, no one would have to know my love life was, and I had a friend take me to the dance. I asked him if he'd go with me as friends, but somehow the wires got crossed, and he thought I was actually asking him out. After work one day, he asked if he could talk to me, and he went into this long speech about how he has a girlfriend, and he loves her very much, and he can't disrespect her by going to the dance with me. All of that was fine. I wasn't mad or anything except I'm a stress laugher. And it struck me as funny that he thought I wanted to date him, when the reality was that I didn't want to date anyone except the love of my life. Of course, all of that is difficult to explain as a mature adult, let alone a 17-year-old girl, so I just laughed. I think about it sometimes and think to myself about how ridiculous the whole situation was, and I wish I could go back and explain it to my ex-coworker, but I can't even remember his first name. Story 31, my time to shine. I was in a summer English class, finishing up some requirement for my BA. It's summer, so it's accelerated, and we're reading 1 to 2 books a week. I like reading, so no big deal, and I try to keep ahead of the curve since I had other classes at the time. So we're discussing Faulkner. A lot of people in the class are struggling with the narrative because Faulkner is Faulkner, and the teacher is gently leading everyone through the text and explaining stuff as we go. I understand the particular section he's explaining, so I zone out and study something else for a few minutes. Class is almost over, and the teacher asks if we have any other questions. I was confused about one thing that wasn't covered, so I raised my hand and asked. So if I understand correctly, giant spoiler that no one had gotten it yet, because it was the next chapter and I ruined it for everyone. You could hear a pin drop. The teacher just kind of sighed. It still keeps me up at night. Story 32, I had a crush on this one girl all throughout elementary school. I'm talking the only girl I liked and always wanted to be with her. Well, once I got into 6th grade, I decided to make my move. My bright idea, I'm cringing at the thought of it, was to just randomly email her via our school emails. Just random stuff out of the ordinary. I ducking hate myself. Even worse, I never really talked to her before and was still kind of an introvert. And one more thing, her brother younger found out and told me she was with a guy. I thanked him and cried for hours when I got home. And that's the story about how I became socially awkward. Story 33, I was 8, and I was at church in the kid service, and they always picked a kid to participate, and they'd usually get a prize after. That day they chose by asking us why we should get to go up, and I literally said my aunt works here. So I deserve it. I was an entitled little, every time I remember it I die a little inside. Story 34, yes. When I was in high school, we had to give in feedback forms about our teachers. I was just going to submit mine totally blank, but the teacher in charge at the time told me that I had to write something for every teacher. Stupidly, I decided to be completely honest and to write exactly what I thought of them. It was all nice, except for one teacher's, which was just Xmas very scary. But she's a good teacher. I meant both of those, but it didn't matter. The teacher was seriously hurt by it, although she pretended it was NBD at first. Then as the weeks went by, she would mention it once a week, gradually seeming more and more upset. Until one day, when another student mentioned being scared to ask her about something, she shouted at him for an entire period. She also mentioned me a bunch, saying she would never forget what I said but could forgive me. Anyways, she was the type of teacher to really consider her students to be her own kids, and I guess me being scared of her hurt her. I do regret that. Story 35, 8th grade advanced math teacher has us fill out a get-to-know-you sheet the first day of school. Asked what our pet peeve was. I didn't know what pet peeve meant, so I put cats, as I love cats. Her room was decorated with kitten posters, and she was a huge cat lady. She never liked me. Story 36, in year 1 or 2, I had a bigger vocab than most of the other kids, and ID just discovered the word feline. We were, I think, talking about what it'd be like to transform into animals. And I wanted to say that it'd be cool to turn into a feline, because I love cats. What came out was I really want to turn into a female. Story 37, last year a friend invited me over for a night of casual. She noticed how shy I was, and really put forth a ton of effort to make me comfortable. I was super nervous and couldn't maintain erection. She was so sweet about it, but it haunts me daily. Story 38, between sophomore and junior year in high school. I went on a summer study program. I was an awkward teen who wasn't, but I thought at the time I was the only awkward one of the bunch. There was a competition. I wanted to sing in it. I can't sing. I chose a song to sing that was a classic, but the version they put on was a remix. I couldn't keep the timing or anything. So on stage, I made a signal to cut the music and walked off stage after performing poorly in the middle of the song. Story 39, there are so many I can come up with. I'm not a good handshaker, and I detest hugs and kisses. Social events are a minefield for me. One that sticks in my mind was I was at a friend's wedding and ran into another friend's mother. She leans in for the awkward, I haven't seen you in a while, cheek touch, fake kiss thing, and I didn't know what to do with my hand. I accidentally put it on her hip during this encounter, which probably was nothing. I'm sure it was nothing. I'm sure she knows that if it was creepy, it was unintentional. I'm sure of that. Totally not creepy. She knows I'm awkward and not a creep. She does. I'm not creepy. She doesn't think I'm a creep and totally hasn't told her daughter, my ex-GF, that I'm a creep. Story 40, in 7th grade, some girl was wearing a Goonies shirt. I had no idea what it was, but it looked like a band or something, and she was preppy. So my emo tried to act offended and said, "Do you even listen to the Goonies?" Story 41, I no longer do. When I think of something that upsets me from the past, I calm myself and recall it and tell myself that it is in the past and I survived and am fine. By remembering it calmly, I remove its power and it goes away. This is because we do not remember original events. We remember the last time we remembered them. So if you remember something and it upsets you, it will upset you the next time you remember it. Note that this does not work well with current problems. Story 42, I was raised very religious, and my grandparents are very good people, but they occasionally make a comment about racial stereotypes. When I was in 2nd grade, I heard my grandpa say something about Indian people not driving well, and I didn't question it. Being the edgy kid, I wanted to sound cool or something and repeat it. I did so by loudly answering a teacher's question in Sunday school with something containing the words, "Asian people can't drive." Immediately after, I accidentally made eye contact with the Asian girl in my class, who was one of the kindest, sweetest people I've ever met. Even not realizing the gravity of my statement, I still saw the look on her face and felt awful. So yeah, that keeps me up a lot. Story 43, it doesn't everyone. This would be 1988 in downtown with the 2 girls I met online BBS scene and my friend. All 3 of these people are players in my life today, BTW. I dated one of them on and off for years. Consider the guy my hetero life partner, fooled around with the other girl and stayed friends. But at this point we're young, it's the 80s, and we're walking around downtown Cleveland. A homeless person asks us for money. I say no, and then follow it up with "You're going to spend it on booze anyway," in this real callous and stereotypical manner. Not even sure where it came from, since I thought I had learned the lessons of Dickens as far as caring about the poor. But nah, That was some kind of lie I told myself at the time. I still thought if you were homeless, you did something to deserve it. One night in my early 20s, that moment came back to me while falling asleep. I beat myself up over that for a while, along with a lot of others. Story 44. I've been overthinking everything I ever said or ever done, and now my brain's so deep in a web that my head has spun. I still think about when I said you too to the delivery man when he said enjoy your pizza. Story 45. I constantly think about the woman at Men's Warehouse that I told was my birthday. When I went to go pick up my suit, she helped me pick out. When I said it was my 21st birthday, she said if I wasn't working right now, I'd totally buy you a drink, to which I responded, haha. Yeah, thanks, and left. Took me like 3 weeks to realize what a moron I am. Story 46. One instance I can remember off the top of my head was in middle school. This girl I thought I was friends with came up to me in between classes in the hallway. I thought she was going to say hi, but she slapped me hard. She went in to say she knows I'm a two-faced and that my constant happy attitude and smile was creepy and disgusting. I wish I would have done more than just stand there frozen. Turn out, some other girl threw me under the bus for something she herself did. This kind of thing, the screaming and slapping me in the face, happened multiple times throughout school, though. I stopped smiling after that. Story 47. I was discussing a recent surgery I had at work to a bunch of people, including a lady with spina bifida who lives in a wheelchair. I specifically was talking about how annoyed I was by not being able to walk for 3 weeks. I revisit that one a lot. Story 48, of course. Fortunately, there's a cure. It's called chronic undersleep. You lose consciousness as soon as your head hits the pillow. Bonus, you will sleepwalk through tomorrow, too. Story 49. I've always been overweight my whole life, even as a little kid. Never really got made fun of for it, though. This is the first and probably the only time I got made fun of for it, to my face anyway. I was in 7th grade, and I was in a small classroom of about 8 people. This very thin girl held up her arm and made a comment about her arm fat. There was clearly nothing there. Her arm was a thin twig. I just kind of rolled my eyes in my mind. The teacher, a man around 35, told her, "You're not fat. Girls always think they're fat," something like that. He points around the class to each person, repeating, "You're not fat. You're not fat. You're not fat." To everyone, he saved me for last, pointed at me, and didn't say anything. A couple people in class chuckled. Extremely inappropriate thing for the teacher to do, and I've never forgotten it. Story 50. When I was about 8, for some reason, I thought that the word virgin was bad. So when my stepbrother at the time started calling me names, I thought it would be a good idea to fire back with, well, at least I'm not a virgin. And my dad's eyes got really wide, and he quickly explained to me what I had just said. 11 years later, I am still embarrassed. Story 51. I was in like 9th or 10th grade, I think, and I was making out with this girl in my basement, and all of a sudden I think it's a good idea to whisper in her ear, below me, in the weirdest and softest voice. It somehow makes it worse typing it out. Story 52. I always physically cringe when I remember I told my crush in 9th grade I like her because I thought she liked me too, but after some reflection I realized it was basic kindness. Story 53. During my high school years, I never ate breakfast because I just wanted to sleep in that little bit more before heading to school. One day in year 7 morning Spanish class, our lovely Spanish teacher was handing out chocolate digestives for every right answer we give. I got one right and got my deserved reward. The next person next to me also got the answer right, but they didn't want the reward, so she asked if anyone wanted to have the biscuit instead, so of course I instinctively put my hand up. Voil, I got a second biscuit. But what haunts me is how I ate that second heavenly snack. As she handed me the biscuit, I was still going through the first biscuit, and why, but as I received that second treat, I just made a tiny coin like slit with my mouth and inserted that biscuit like you would when inserting a coin to play in the arcade. I cannot forget the looks everyone in the class gave me as they tried to compute WTF just happened. I guess I played myself,